You're listening to the Black to Business podcast, an educational podcast providing Black entrepreneurs with the tools and resources to start and grow their businesses. We chat with vetted Black entrepreneurs, thought leaders, and business owners as they provide tips and resources to help take your business to the next level. I'm your host, Monique T. Marshall. On this episode of the Black to Business podcast.
Now, Black entrepreneurs, for some reason, we have this fear of limitation. And I see it so often. It's like, we don't want to put a Black face on the homepage of our website because we don't want people to think this is just for Black people or another one of those brands, right? And it's just so shocking to me because the buying power in our community is 1.1 trillion. Like, there's really nothing limiting about that. I have a hard time understanding how people, view that as limiting. And furthermore, I always ask people to just take a look at, the old days when FUBU and Karl Kani were hot. Like, those brands, FUBU in particular, was built into a multi-million-dollar empire. And they were unapologetic about who they were and who they were here for.
Today's topic is very near and dear to my heart because I don't think it's a topic that we discuss much. In a post-Obama era where Black Americans are proclaiming their Blackness now more than ever, it's disappointing to see Black-owned businesses shy away from serving their own people. What mainstream brands do so intently with Eurocentric brand messaging and imagery, Black businesses steer clear of the fear of limiting themselves if they focus solely on Black audiences. Why is that? Well, today we're going to discuss why serving Black is the new buying Black with Amber Williams of PunkyFlair. Storyteller Amber Williams is at the forefront of efforts to dispel this myth of limitation by pushing Black businesses towards more sophisticated, unapologetic branding. Her brand storytelling agency, PunkyFlair, teaches founders and CEOs how to improve their sales through stories built around their true customers. Amber has crafted brand language for Armani, CVS, the U.S. Olympics, and now uses her talents to serve Black-owned startups such as Camille Rose Naturals, Heat-Free Hair, and Shea Radiance. Amber's aim is to shift the idea from merely buying Black to serving Black, and she would love to share this with you listeners to transform your brand messaging. So in today's episode, we're discussing where to start when crafting your brand story, improving your sales through your story, how to be unapologetically Black in your branding, and why not targeting the Black community could hurt your business. So this episode was truly special because it's something that I discuss all the time, and I'm sure you do too. But let's get into it. So Amber, thank you so much for joining the show. I'm really excited about today's topic. So thank you for being on the podcast.
Yes, thank you for having me. I'm so excited to chat about this with you.
Yes. So before we get started, I always like to start with, for the people who don't yet know you, our listeners, if you could just talk a little bit about who you are, what you do, and how you got started in your business.
Yeah, absolutely. So I am Amber Williams, and I am a brand storyteller, and I help entrepreneurs really uncover the things that makes their brand special and figured out a way to tell that story. So essentially, I help people understand their audience, communicate their vision, and sell with story. And I kind of landed here in an interesting way. So, I studied psychology in college, and then I studied marketing in grad school, and I have like these different work experiences in, several different industries like fashion and real estate, beauty, automotive, like all over the place. And when I was interning in graduate school, I was working on some large brands like Volkswagen and State Farm. And at the time, I was in the brand strategy department. And, I was kind of, as a young intern, soaking up all, this knowledge and how these senior strategists would go about, relaunching brands or launching new products for brands or rebranding, $1 million companies. And over the years, I started to just really take note on the successes, right? And everything that people would do to make a new brand introduction to a new group of people work and to make it stick. And over the course of 7 years, I came to the realization that what made any brand successful and lasting in the marketplace was story. It was the brands that were not super salesy. It was the marketing and the messaging that was personal and that was customized. And it was the companies that could, over time, say the same thing, but in different ways by telling a story. And so when I realized that, I decided that I wanted to be a storyteller. I was just amazed with the power of it. And so when I went on maternity leave, when I had my son about 4 years ago, I started crafting a master plan on how I could not return from maternity leave, number one, and how I could help entrepreneurs and just smaller businesses do the same thing that these large companies were doing, so they could have that same success, because I had seen it work before. So that's kind of how I landed here.
Yes. So I have heard the stories about, I think it's so wonderful when people are out on maternity leave and they also take advantage of that time too. So it's wonderful that you were able to do that, but also, just being able to watch what these bigger brands are doing so that you can take that in turn and help smaller brands. So that's amazing. So yes, which brings me to today's topic, which I'm so excited to talk about because I think it's something that we don't talk about enough. And I'm so glad that you're on the show to talk about telling your story, but also why serving Blacks is the new buying Blacks. Yeah. So yes. So when it comes to the brand story or the brand messaging, why does it matter for a business? And what are some of the things that Black business owners specifically should be paying to when it comes to their brand story and messaging?
Yeah, absolutely. Great question. So, if you think about story, I'm willing to bet that whatever your favorite story is, like whatever your favorite movie is or your favorite novel, or even, your favorite play, I'm willing to bet that it's your favorite story because you see yourself in it. Like you see yourself in some character. You identify with somebody in that story, right? And that character that you identify with is either a character that reflects exactly who you are now, or it's a character that reflects who you want to be. So when you think about business and branding, people buy into the same thing that they do when they go to the movies. And that's story. I always say people don't buy products, they buy stories. And so if your brand isn't telling one that the people you want to reach can see themselves in or connect to, they're not going to buy from you, right? Because there's no relation to who they are, where they want to be. And so story is so important because it's that one thing that can help you connect in a way that will set you apart from your competitors, even if you're selling the same thing.
Yes. And I think that's, the awesome thing about it is we are emotional human beings. And yeah, in your experience, what are some of the things that you've noticed about the different brands specifically that you've worked with? What are some of the good things you've seen and some of the things that you said, no, this needs to be tweaked?
Yeah. So, great question. I feel like the most popular mistake I see when it comes to brand story is people thinking that their brand story is a story about how their brand got started. I see that all the time. Like you go to a website and says, our story, this is our story. This is our brand story. And you have to ask yourself, why does your customer care? You know, like when you're writing these pieces, when you're creating your about page, if you are only talking about yourself, you have to ask yourself, why do they care? Like, am I pulling them into this story in a way? Am I sharing with them why all of this background knowledge and work that went into starting this company, why it matters to them or how it's going to make their life better? And so that's usually when I work with clients, that's the first thing that we scrap is what they are currently calling their story. And I think people do it by default, right? Like they're just, you know, founders are very proud of everything that they've done, you know, to get up and running. And so they want to share that story. But if you consider your favorite story or any great story, it's never just one-sided. So that's probably the biggest problem that I usually see. Another major mistake that I see, especially with entrepreneurs that are just getting started, is that in their brand messaging, they talk like themselves, right? You start a brand, and a lot of times, you know, many of these small business owners, they started their company to solve their own problem first, right? So let's look at a makeup brand, for example. If you were shopping for a foundation for darker skin tones and you couldn't find it anywhere and you created your own, you know, foundation line for darker skin tones that now has more shades than a mainstream brand has, well, you've solved your own problem. And so by default, many of those business owners, their brand messaging sounds like themselves because they make the mistake of believing that they are the only customer or they are representative of all their customers. And so they skip that process. They skip that step of understanding who their customer is in their story, and they start to just talk like themselves. And a lot of times people don't realize they've made that mistake, you know, until they get a couple years down the line and they can't figure out why their message isn't really resonating. So those are probably like the biggest errors that I see, you know, for brands in that like 0 to 2 year stage when they're trying to craft their story.
So I definitely, before we move on, I want to dive a little bit deeper into that, because how is that playing into brand voice? And also, you know, there's a lot of talk about, find your avatar and what the avatar looks like. So, you know, making sure that you're relatable, but also, I guess, how are you testing if it resonates with people?
Yeah, so that is a great question. So first off, you know, you have to know your people, right? So when you're just getting started, you're usually going off of a hypothesis, right? Which is fine. But as you continue to get sales and, you know, if you have, you know, an online presence, there's plenty of tools that you can use to just data track what pages people are staying on, what messages on your social media posts they're clicking on. And also I tell entrepreneurs to just get scrappy and email some of your customers and see if you can jump on a call with them, you know, to learn more about who they are and what some of their challenges are. And as you have some of these conversations, you'll start to pick up on the language that they're using, so you can understand more about their personalities. So, you know, avatars are cool. I'm all about diving really, really, really deep into who your customer is, because knowing your customer is what should really shape everything. So if you build a brand around yourself, right? If you pick a logo that you like, colors that you like, and you're talking the way that you talk, you're going to have a hard time connecting with a group of people, right? Because it's all built around yourself. But if you dive into, you know, your customer's perspective, like what problems they're having, why they're having them, dive deep into their preferences, like, you know, what are they into? Is this a luxury shopper? Is it a coupon clipper? You know, what kind of preferences does this person have? And then most importantly, their personality. Then you'll understand how you should position your brand, you know, how your brand should look, how your brand should sound, what words you should use, everything. So that really is step one, you know, in crafting a strong brand story that's going to sell, is getting to know that customer.
I already have some ideas brewing because I think that's a great thing. It's like going kind of old school and like you said, like really reaching out and talking to. So I like that. I think I like that. So let's talk about
themselves, right? Like I've never heard, anytime I've advised a client to do that, I've never really heard a story of a customer not wanting to talk about themselves. You know, like people love to talk about themselves. So it's free and it's a great opportunity to improve your business just by having quick conversations with the people who are buying from you, right? So, yeah.
So let's talk about Black businesses, us, the folks. What are some of the things that, because I love that you focus on us being unapologetic in our branding based on who you've worked with and some of the brands you've worked with. So speaking on, your experiences, what is it and why does it matter for us to be unapologetic in our branding when it comes to Black businesses?
Yeah, I mean, if you look at European brands or any large mainstream brand, they are unapologetic about featuring nothing but who they want to reach in their advertising, right? You could look at the Louis Vuitton website and there's not a drop of melanin on the homepage. You could look at their any luxury brands ads in any magazine, any fashion magazine, and they rarely have anyone who's not European, but yet we rush to buy from them, right? It's so funny because I cannot name a high earning Black woman that does not have a Louis bag, right? But Louis does not include us in their branding. And so my point is that they're unapologetic about that. They're not going to change anything anytime soon because what they're doing works. Who they're targeting and who they want to reach is who they feature. And in turn, other people buy from them. But the people that they want to buy definitely know that their brands are for them. Now, Black entrepreneurs, for some reason, we have this fear of limitation. And I see it so often. It's like, we don't want to put a Black face on the homepage of our website because we don't want people to think this is just for Black people or another one of those brands, right? And it's just so shocking to me because the buying power in our community is 1.1 trillion. Like there's really nothing limiting about that. I have a hard time understanding how people, view that as limiting. And furthermore, I always ask people to just take a look at, the old days when FUBU and Karl Kani were hot. Like those brands, FUBU in particular, was built into a multi-million-dollar empire. And they were unapologetic about who they were and who they were here for. But Black people were not the only people who bought from them. Just because they only featured Black people in their ads. I remember NSYNC was wearing FUBU on stage for a performance, So it's not like other people won't buy from you, but it's that the people that you are here to serve will know that you are for them. And so I always encourage my clients and just any Black entrepreneurs that I come across to stay true to who they are and who their customers are. And so I'm not saying that every Black owned business has Black customers, right? Because some of them don't. But for the ones that do, there's no reason why those Black faces should not be the ones on your Instagram and on your website and in your advertising, and in your digital ads. Those are the people who are buying from you. So those are the people who should be featured so that they can continue buying from you, right? So I think it's just a fear of limitation that we as a community have to get over. We really just have to get over that and start to recognize the power when we, cultivate our own, when we serve each other, not just buy from each other, but really cater to each other.
I love it. And, my question is, because I recently had this discussion with a friend, and I do all the time. I have these types of discussion, and I really have to call people out. I have people who have African-based businesses, and they have, other races on the website. And I really asked, why do you do that? I actually had someone want to work with Blacks in Business, and I went to his company website. He didn't even have himself on the website. And I really asked him, he said, I never thought about that. Older guy. And it was just so, to me, disappointing. But I want to know, why do you feel like we care? I don't care, but there are those who do.
I think it goes back to just marketing rule number one that they're breaking for this fear of limitation. And that's, they get in business and they want to stay in business. And so in an attempt to do that, they try to be all things to all people. Right. And so they try to be all encompassing and, showcase that their products are not just for Black people. Other people can use them too. And so they throw everybody else, in the brand. And again, it goes back to the fear of limitation. But I think it also goes to the fear of failure as a business and thinking that if you incorporate, Black customers into your branding, that we're too small of a segment to sustain your business. And that's not true at all. So I think it's that fear of limitation. I think it's that fear of failure and that cardinal marketing mistake of trying to be something to everyone, when really it's more important to be something special to someone rather than an option to everyone. Right. So I always try to caution people and ask them, well, how do you want your story told? How do you want your story told? Do you want it to connect with the people who you want to pull into this journey, into the story? Or do you want your story to be generic and meaningless? And that's what happens. You end up having a meaningless story when you don't have any true star characters in it, if I'm making sense.
Yes. And I think it's one of the things I want to touch on is the fact that you mentioned the buying power of the Black community, but also people's fear of failure and such. But, what you've seen as success, because I recall Mandy Bowen of Official Black Wall Street on the episode 14, just the way she's been able to build such a platform with no funding and based off our community. So within your experience, what are some of the success stories that you've seen and worked with, and why do you feel that they've worked, and how have you been able to convey this message to them?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, one of my favorite success stories is the story of the Heat Free Hair brand. So Heat Free Hair is a collection of 100% virgin hair extensions exclusively for natural textures. So, when they first got started several years ago, they were the very first hair extensions company that had these natural textures, right? It was around the time that Black women were starting to go natural and really be unapologetic about that look. And so they recognized this need amongst Black women and wanted to serve them through their transitioning period, right? Through their, hair growing out and recognizing that they wanted to look beautiful along the way, but they wanted hair extensions that helped them look like a Black woman would look with natural hair, right? And so they really capitalized on that need by just stopping to understand who this Black customer was and how she needed and wanted to be served along her beauty journey. And so, they have been able to really dominate that space over this past couple of years. And I started working with the brand probably about 3 years ago. And we took some time to really dive deep to hone in on who this Black woman was and what are the things that she's looking for, not just when it comes to her hair extensions, but what is she really aspiring to be in life? So we really dug deep, those three things that I mentioned, we dug deep to understand her challenges, her beauty challenges, her life challenges. We dug deep to understand, who some of her role models were, what some of her media preferences were. And then we stopped to really sit down and talk to some of these customers face to face to get a grasp of their personality. And so we were able to build, almost this 21st century customer profile that of this Black woman. And this profile helped us completely rebrand the company. And so, the company was already serving Black, but we wanted to serve her and speak to her in a more meaningful way. And so, when you think about how a company can grow, you can go in two different directions. You can grow by digging deeper into who your customer is and creating new ways along their journey to serve them, new products or tools that serve them. Or you can go the route of trying to be more appealing to other people's customers. So you have to choose. Obviously, the former is the better one. And so understanding who this customer was, we were able to, come up with new ways that we could serve her. So my client had a great idea to create this perfect hair true you quiz, to help this woman understand what kind of hair would be right for her based on, her needs. We were able to totally revamp the website, come up with our beliefs that our customers also share in. So, it led to just this new discovery of who this Black woman was and how we could speak to her in a way that really, really resonated with who she was and really kept her loyal to the brand. So that's been a huge success story of mine, and one that it's just been awesome to share with my client. And they're just a major success story in the hair extensions place. So that's one. Another one that I actually just got done rebranding, it's been really, really fun, is a company called Black and Green.
Is Black and Green?
Yeah, it's Black and Green is the name of the marketplace. And so Black and Green is an all natural marketplace by all Black artisans. And they are completely unapologetic about the fact that the products they sell are by Black artisans and they are targeting Black people, period. They plaster it all over the website everywhere.
Love it.
Yeah. And so this is for the Black woman who wants to be unapologetically Black and buy Black, but also live green without compromise. And so this was awesome just to work with this brand to understand their story, understand who their customer is, and reshape their messaging to be unapologetic and to speak directly to them. And, this is a new company that has just launched this year, and they've already been featured in Essence, Glamour, Blavity, Teen Vogue. And it's because of this story, this brand message that perfectly resonates with who this customer is. So I think those are two huge success stories of brands who know who their customers are and they are unapologetic about serving them.
Yes, I love Heat Free. They're definitely on the wish list. I've been following them for years as well, and just the fact that they've really been growing. It is genuine, and that's one of the things that connected me to them. So yes, but I'm going to check out Black and Green. I love that. And speaking of hair and the people who are doing it right, we have to touch on the people who kind of rubbed us the wrong way, but they're our brothers and sisters. So Shea Moisture, what was that for you? What are your thoughts on that situation?
Oh my gosh, that's so funny you asked because I just wrote a blog post about that the other day. I didn't know what made that come back up into my mind, but I was like, I've got to get this frustration out and onto. Shea Moisture was the very first brand I used when I transitioned to being natural years ago, right? And, they kind of indoctrinated me into this natural hair lifestyle. And I remember all my friends who were natural immediately recommended Shea Moisture. It was everyone was like, oh yeah, of course you need Shea Moisture. And the other day I needed a deep conditioner for my hair, like one of those beauty emergencies where I was like, I need it now. It was 8:00 at night. I was like, I got to go to Target and get something for my hair. And I didn't realize until after I left Target that the natural hair aisle in stores is now, well, it's just that it's an aisle when we used to just have 2 feet, right? And so it's an aisle. And I didn't realize it until I checked out that I didn't even notice Shea Moisture in this entire aisle. I was looking for Camille Rose, but I didn't even see Shea Moisture. And it's interesting because I think what they did last year is the reason why I totally just don't even see, don't look for them, don't check for them, don't even think about buying from them. And so that campaign that they ran last year, what was it called? Hair, Love, Hate?
I don't even know.
Really, really bad. But that campaign that they ran was just, they made that cardinal mistake that we're talking about. They attempted to be all things to all people, right? And they completely alienated the very women that helped build their brand up, right? The very people who bought from them first, who, were their early influencers, who were their unpaid ambassadors. I'm talking about they had fanatics, right? Who told everybody about Shea Moisture, who blogged about them before blogging for money was even a thing. And for them to come out with an ad that featured, redheaded women and, white women with straight hair and tried to put them in the same bucket as the Black girl with a kinky texture, and that we're all in the same boat and have the same struggles, and that Shea Moisture can be that solution. That was the most inauthentic story I think I've seen in years, specifically in the beauty industry. And so, it's funny because it was so offensive that they had to issue a public apology, right?
Yes.
And I remember taking screenshots of their Facebook page and what customers were saying. And people were infuriated. They were saying things like, keep your apologies. This was your intention to cut out the majority of your customer base. Now you're feeling it. That's the only way you're apologizing. Why would you upset the very people that made your business flourish? I mean, customers were livid. And it's just so shocking because I'm trying to figure out, how did that ad even get out the door?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
How did it even get out the door? And it really shows what happens when you don't stay true to your story. And while you may be a big brand like Shea Moisture and have the financial resources to try to bounce back from it, when you're a smaller business, a mistake like that is fatal. Like your whole business could shut down if you lose your whole customer base, or if you upset that many people that, were the first people to buy from you. So, every time I talk about this story, people are like, oh, well, they bounced back. They got acquired for millions of dollars. That's fine. But the damage is done within their customer base, right? They have still left a bad taste in a lot of people's mouths who have now gone to buy from other brands who celebrate and recognize them.
And I agree. I think, it was a store by me that I racked up before that happened. And I was like, oh my God, why? But, after my products were finished, I was finished. And I had a whole picture, I remember, on my Instagram when I went and bought all of those products. I'm like, yeah, this is at ShopRite. It was like a whole slew of products. And I literally went, and it was a long time ago before that, I literally went and erased that picture. I was like, I can't.
Yep. You see that? It's, you don't even want anything to do with them. Like, not even just you're not buying again. Like, you don't even want any association with that.
Yes. And I know you mentioned before we get into how do people, kind of like target and message, the fact that there are those who don't focus on the Black community or those who choose not to. So if you could just talk a little bit about that and what that means, because I always say that's the fact too. Everyone is not, your customer is not the Black person, but also how can, we still represent the community in other ways?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think so. all Black-owned businesses are not solely focused on serving the Black customer, and that's fine, but I see a lot of brands who are set up like that, who hide their face, as you mentioned. I see that a lot actually in the tech space. And so I think one way that you can still connect is to show show who you are, because it gives visibility to Black entrepreneurship by us just seeing your face. So I think that that's, the main thing that you can do. And then whoever your customers are, continue to get to know them and showcase who they are, right? And so if you find that your customer base is not all Black, but it's varied, just make sure you don't leave that Black face out of it, for fear of limitation. So I think it all goes back to knowing your customer. And then, just as we talked about being unapologetic about who your customers are, be unapologetic about who you are and what your story is, right? How you got to where you are and why you felt like solving this problem was important. Sometimes Black entrepreneurs shy away from their personal story and how it ties into their customers, regardless of what race their customers are, because they feel like maybe their background is too Black, right? And people, won't cling to that or won't relate to it. And so I think the idea of being unapologetic still applies, to that and showcasing who you are as an entrepreneur.
Definitely. I love that. And speaking of tying, so where do you start when crafting your brand message and your brand story?
Absolutely. So don't start with yourself. You start with where all great stories start, and that's with the star character. And for business, your star character is your customer. So you can't properly set up a brand or create a message or, set up your website or even create a logo if you don't understand who your people are, right? Because your customer is who should shape all of that, right? Your customer is who should shape, the language that you use, the messaging that you use, the action words that you use when you're asking them to do something. They should even shape, the names of your products. So I work with a lot of companies and I do like their product naming. And, every brand has a distinct personality that should be played out even in their product names, because those names are set up to attract a certain person to buy from them. So you can't really do anything until you understand who your customer is. So there's a couple ways that you can kind of get started with that discovery. The first thing is to set up all your tracking systems so that you can track people's behavior, right? So make sure you have Google Analytics set up on your site, where people come to buy. Make sure you're taking a look at your Facebook insights, and looking at your insights on Instagram as well. Whatever email tool you're using, make sure you pay close attention to, those open rates and what email subject lines people are, opening, what they're clicking on inside those messages. And so just first set up all of those tools. But I really love it when people start to dig into some of those more qualitative, customer research methodologies. So I always tell people first thing you should do is visualize your customer, right? So if you're just getting started and you have, 6 months worth of sales, take a look at who those people are who are buying from you and put a Pinterest board together or some kind of customer collage with pictures of them, the products they've bought, where they live, who some of their role models might be. Like really visualize who this person is and try to bring them to life. And then start to, set up some ways to get constant feedback from them. So I always kind of help people create what I call a customer perspective survey. And in that survey, we ask questions like, what are your biggest challenges in this space? Where are you currently shopping now, to get your products or to solve your problems? What would the ideal solution look like, right? So that helps business owners even with their own, product innovation. I even asked some personality questions like, what does an ideal Friday night look like for you? What TV shows do you watch? Who's your favorite music artist, right? And, asking some of these questions will help you just get a taste of who this person is, why they're having these problems, and try to walk away with an answer as to where your brand fits into their lives and how you can better serve them. So that's really the starting point.
I like that. And I like, one thing I really like is like your techniques, your ways are really about connection. And I think even though you spoke about it before, it's like, that's what draws people. But I feel like people really want to feel special. So all the ways that we can do that is, great. And, speaking of using all of those things, like tying in the fact that, we have to be unapologetic in our branding and, use these ways to find our customer. If you could just talk about sales and give us some tips on, not fearing, for those who do fear of limiting themselves and those who are on the podcast listening, who had those thoughts but are like, I'm going to be unapologetic. Giving some tips on, sales and how can we improve and all of those great things and even the results that you've been able to witness.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think when you know your customer and you are unapologetic about serving them and speaking to them and creating products for them, the sky is truly the limit, right? So we know that the buying power of Black people is 1.1 trillion. The buying power of Black women in the beauty industry is in the billions. And so, looking at some of those examples of brands that have been unapologetic, well, some of these startup brands are in the millions, right? Like, they're enjoying sales in the millions of dollars per year. FUBU grew in the hundreds of millions, right? Just by being unapologetic and knowing who their people were and never shying away from that. So, your sales the sky is truly the limit to what you can do when you focus on who your person is. And, you just want to track and monitor. So all Black people are not the same, obviously, right? And so that's why it's so important to get to know what kind of customers you have, right? So the Black customer is not just we don't all have the same perspective or preferences or personalities. We don't all watch the same shows or listen to the same music. We don't all have the same problems and ideal solutions. So when you segment and figure out, the nuances and then the uniqueness between yours, well, your sales will show. It's kind of inevitable that when you hyper focus and target into one group of people, your sales are going to show. They're definitely going to show because that person is going to know that you are for them. And your story is going to be so compelling that they're going to be compelled to buy from you, right? They're not even going to consider your customers. So I always encourage people to, create a few messages that, will work with your customer and then test them out, right? See which messages are converting the best on social media, which emails are being opened the most and people are responding to.
Definitely. So speaking of all these tips, I know I've, gained a lot. And what are some of the ways that, if I wanted to come work with Amber and PunkyFlair, like what would that process look like? And what are some of the things that you offer and have done for your customers?
Sure. Well, I help my customers do three things. I help them understand their audience. So diving really deep into those things that we mentioned, perspective, preference, personality, and identifying exactly how they can speak to those customers. And so I actually have a 3-part framework. It's called Customer Kamikaze. It's really cool. I actually just opened enrollment last week. Yeah, so Customer Kamikaze is the 3-part framework that I've used to help my startup clients actually scale their businesses into the millions just by understanding who their customers are and tailoring, all of their branding and marketing activities around them. So Customer Kamikaze is what I always recommend first, right? Because we can't really move on until we understand who we're serving, right? And who we're talking to. And then another service that I have is I do something called a brand voiceover. And once people get who their customer is, then I give their brands a unique personality and tone of voice. And I craft all of their brand messaging. So, everything from your tagline to, the different pages you're going to have in your website, how you're going to talk, what your brand promise is, your about page, a real about page. I give people all the language that they need to sell in that brand voiceover service. So, those are my 2 primary services. And then one of my favorite things to do once people are all set up, with their brand voice and understanding their customer is to help them either name their brands or name their products. And so I do that for a lot of my beauty startup clients, just help them make sure that, the naming of those services and of those products really reinforces that story and speaks to that customer. So those are 3 ways. And you can check those out at PunkyFlair.com, PunkyFlair.
Well, you just took the next question. I really love all of those services, but the next question was, how can people continue to connect with you and, some of the great things that you're doing? How can they reach you? How can we support you?
Yeah, absolutely. So, as I mentioned, Customer Kamikaze just opened. So if you go to PunkyFlair.com/CK, you can enroll right now. I have a special for 20% off. And then I also have 10% off the payment plan. So it's set up, it's super duper affordable. Every entrepreneur at every stage needs it, especially new entrepreneurs. You can check me out there. And then I'm on Facebook at facebook.com/PunkyFlair. And I'm also on Instagram at PunkyFlair. And right now I actually have a free audio training on how to build a brand that will last forever. And if you just head over to my site, you can grab that for free. It's a really good introduction into, everything that we've talked about today.
Love it. So I love all of that. I always kind of like to end with asking, and all your success and all of the great things that you've been able to accomplish, looking back at your 23-year-old self, what advice would you give 23-year-old Amber?
Oh my gosh, that is such a good question. 23-year-old Amber was in New York City, walking around broke, working in the fashion industry. So if I could give myself any advice back then, I would say, be unapologetic about your dreams. And so a core part of who I am today, as a wife, as a mom, as an entrepreneur, being unapologetic is just a core part of who I am, right? And I think I've had to go through a lot of different trials and journeys and trying to adapt to other people's expectations of me or, other people's normal. And as if I could go back and tell my 23-year-old self anything, it would be to trust your own magic and your own journey and to be unapologetic about where you want to land. So yeah, that's what I would say.
I love it. I love this thought of being unapologetic and just genuine to you. So I love that you live by that. That's amazing. But Amber, it has been such a pleasure. I've learned a lot and I'm so excited to share with the audience and I'm sure they're going to learn a lot. So really appreciate you for taking the time to share your story and just share knowledge with us on Black to Business. So thank you for being here.
Yeah, I really, really enjoyed it. Thank you so much for having me.
Of course. And until next time, guys.
So I hope you guys enjoyed that episode. I sure enjoyed recording it. And I hope you really took something away. As we mentioned in the episode, if your business isn't focused on the Black consumer, it's important for you to figure out how you can also engage the Black community if that isn't your focus. For complete show notes, please visit blacktobusiness.com/EP33-Amber Williams. And don't forget to rate and subscribe, and also continue to listen. We really and truly appreciate you. So until next time.